So, this has been a week. For the past few days, since the results of the presidential election became clear, I've had a lot of conversations with a number of you and others within our congregation and beyond wanting to know, bizarrely enough, what I think. Really, people want to know what it means for the future of our country, what the election means for the relationship between the United States and Israel, whether or not the election means that things are going to be good for the Jews. And again, they want to know what I think, although I'm not a political scientist and I'm not a historian. I'm certainly not a fortune teller. I'm a rabbi, and that means that my job is to learn Torah and to teach Torah. So tonight we're going to learn Torah together. So, as part of that work, I want to offer you three small pieces of insight, I hope. Three small moments from our Torah portion this week, Parshat Lech Lecha. And once again, I'm not talking to you about politics, and I'm not talking to you about the winners and the losers, and I'm not talking to you about the direction in which I think our country is headed. But, like every time we learn Torah, we have an opportunity to find some light to shed on our path. God willing, some new insights into the circumstances in which we find ourselves this week, and maybe some soothing for the intense feelings that so many of us are feeling this week. So insight number one, you can never help someone else if you are unable to hear them. Once again, this year, our country has realized the power of this truth. One's ability to help is always limited by one's ability to hear. There's a story from the Hasidic tradition that illustrates this point perfectly. It comes from a story told by Rabbi Moshe Leib from Sasov, and he tells the story this way. The rabbi says, "I learned everything I know about how to help other people from a drunk peasant I saw in a tavern. I watched him sit drinking for a long time in silence, and after some time, another drunk in the bar slung his arm around him and said, 'My brother, I love you.' So the peasant then turned to the other man and said, 'Tell me, do you know what's hurting me right now?' And the first man looked surprised and said, 'Of course not, how would I know that?' But the first man responded, 'You say you love me, and yet you don't know what hurts me. If you really loved me, you would know what caused me pain.'" Our portion this week talks about the journey of Abraham and Sarah at a time of great uncertainty and fear in their lives. We know from the text and from the myriad rabbinic commentaries on it that Abraham loves his wife desperately and that he wants to ensure her safety. Abraham himself must feel terrified when along the way he encounters the Pharaoh, the all-powerful monarch who rules over all of Egypt. And Abraham must want more than anything else to ensure the safety of his family, and so he makes the tactical decision to offer to let Pharaoh take Sarah as a lover. What's he doing? If he really hopes to ensure the longevity of his family, the safety of his wife, we have to wonder, what is he doing, and how well did he really know Sarah to make this offer? How well did he know what hurt her, what made her feel frightened? And if what he wanted more than anything else was to make her feel safe, how could he have chosen that as the path they would take forward together? It's a teaching that all of us have come to know very well by now. No one can presume to offer to help us if they don't know what hurts us. Long before the votes in this election were cast and after they were counted, this remained, I think, maybe the most important factor facing us as Americans working at play in this election. Ours is, it is clear, a divided nation with strong and principled agreement pulling Americans in opposite directions away from each other. And there is real and enduring fear that underlies the differences between us. So many of us live with anxiety of different kinds every day, as the fates of our families rise and fall with the stock market, the price of oil. We worry about the safety and security of our nation's borders and its hubs of transportation. We worry about the integrity and the future of its electrical and water and electronic infrastructure. We worry about whether new legislation will undermine the integrity of our marriages and our families. We worry about whether the color of our skin will place us in danger if we find ourselves in the wrong neighborhoods, facing the wrong people. If we want to fix any of these fears, we must get better at knowing what hurts each other. Number 2, the Torah this week contains for us the seeds of one of the most primary truths sacred to us as Americans, that we have the right to feel safe. Life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, all of us know by now, are among the core rights that we enjoy as Americans, and it's our mission as citizens and as people of faith to make sure that these rights are preserved for all of our fellow Americans. Our country has a primary obligation to protect the bodies of those who call America home. Bodies that are old and young, rich or poor. We take care of each other. That's what we do. Our government is in the business of looking after some 300 million souls. We have to do it conscientiously and effectively. So when we find ourselves at a time when the bodies of our black and brown brothers and sisters, of our Muslim cousins, of the LGBT individuals and households in our community feel threatened or come under actual attack, it's America's obligation to stretch the Sukkot Shalom we prayed about, the shelter of peace, a bit wider to cover them too. And I scarcely need to add that we have been the grateful beneficiaries of America's ability to protect the bodies of Jewish Americans as well, now and at times of our people's greatest peril. But there is a vital corollary to this rule, and it's one that we Jews know very, very well. We have the right to feel safe, but we shouldn't confuse that right with feeling comfortable. Again and again in Jewish history, virtually every time we felt most comfortable, most at ease, those periods are nearly always a prologue to calamity. The whole of the Jewish national story begins with this week's portion. God speaks to Abram and commands him, "Get up and go." And Abram does. He gets up and he leaves because he knows he must and because God's command is not ambiguous. If anything, God goes to great pains to repeat God's self. Get up and leave, it says in the very beginning of Genesis 12. Leave your country, leave your birthplace, leave your family's home. Get up and get out. You can't stay where you feel most comfortable if you wish to live in covenant with God. Now, I see some worried faces, so I need to make sure to clarify that I'm not saying it's time for Jews to leave. I'm saying that a constant sense of restlessness, a mild undercurrent of unease, has always remained a necessary precondition for Jewish spiritual wakefulness and tremendous Jewish creativity. One of the most interesting political polls I read about this week was the one that asked respondents to the poll who were leaving the voting booth, to what degree do you feel like a stranger in America? Now remember, these are all registered voters. These are not immigrants or visitors or travelers. These are people voting in an American election. To what degree do you feel like a stranger in America? To what degree do you feel uncomfortable to live as yourself here? And a majority of people responding to that poll, corresponding perhaps to millions of Americans, on the left and on the right, registered Democrats and Republicans, responded that they do not feel at home in America, that they do not feel at ease in their own country, that they do not feel that this place is a home for them in a way that they wished it would be, in a way it used to be, in a way it needs to be. That edge of discomfort, even in one's home, is often the overture to significant periods of upheaval and personal and national growth. Number 3. This week's Torah portion provides another truth about our people's national literature and our epic history. The spark of ignition and catalyst of progress for virtually every major plot thread in the Jewish Bible, a critical and indispensable precondition for every major narrative leap forward, is hunger, famine, poverty, scarcity. How many significant turning points in the lives of individuals, communities, and nations in Jewish biblical history come into being as the result of need, of hunger, of the gnawing realization that we don't have enough and that something must be done. In the portion this week, Abraham and Sarah find that there is a devastating famine raging its way through the land of Canaan, and so they have to act. They have to relieve their hunger, and so they make their way to Egypt and to the Pharaoh when that scene that I described earlier takes place. In the book of Exodus, the rabbis teach that Moses discovered the burning bush only because he went searching for a wayward lamb that was so hungry it wandered off looking for fresher pasture. At the end of the book of Genesis, Joseph becomes reunited with his brothers only after famine again devastates their homeland, and they come to him begging for help and intervention. In the book of Ruth, Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi go looking for food in Moab after a deadly famine, and their pain is devastating and real. I went away full, Naomi says. I went away full and came back empty. Those words might feel at home this week in the mouths of millions of Americans as well. We used to be full. We used to have everything we needed. We used to be safe and comfortable and at ease, but now we're empty. And maybe we were empty all along. Those hunger pangs, those feelings of emptiness and need are again the necessary overture that must be played before the redemption of a people and its spiritual advancement can come to pass. Jewish tradition talks a lot about what the arrival of the Messiah will feel like. And there is agreement among the rabbis that just like at every birth, the Messiah's arrival will be preceded by painful, racking birth pangs. No Messiah, no redemption, no rescue can come into the world without wrenching contractions that bring tears to the eyes. That same Naomi, who felt only her emptiness, would, unbeknownst to her, one day become the great-grandmother of King David and the foremother of the Messiah who is yet to come. Things break. People go hungry. Fracture is inevitable. It's a simple physical reality of the world, but to Jewish eyes, we have to remember brokenness is always the beginning of repair and wholeness, which result in a finished product that is more beautiful than we imagined. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem was the most devastating calamity of ancient Jewish history. And how is it memorialized now? When we break a glass under the chuppah. The phrase tikkun olam, repairing the world, has become the motto and mission of modern Judaism, and it has its roots in an old Kabbalistic story about shattering vessels. Cosmic fracture that allows God's presence and light to enter the world. Without the brokenness, there's no light. But we're not allowed to bask idly in the light. We use it to see in the dark when we do the work of collecting those tiny shards painstakingly, one by one by one. Millions of our fellow citizens feel that there is a fracture, a fault line, a brokenness that underlies our civic life. The disagreement comes only in the question of timing. Was this week the beginning of a great brokenness, or was it simply the culmination of fractures that had been put into place years earlier? As I told you at the beginning of my remarks this evening, my job tonight isn't to explain politics or lobby for votes or endorse candidates or legislation or platforms. My job is to learn Torah. My job is to teach Torah. My job is the same as your job when we're in this place, to find things that are true, because our tradition is uncompromising on that point. Wherever we find things that are true, we found a place where God lives. So whether for you this was a week of grateful affirmation and celebration and joy, a time of grief and disappointment, surprise and despair, your job, my job, our job is to find Torah and learn it. Our job is to hear so that we can help. Our job is to engineer and defend safety and security, but remain vigilant that it not melt into complacency. Our job is to remember that things always break, and to get better than we already are, we must improve our skill at cleaning and restoring and repairing. A lot of people this week have spent time talking about how divided we are. They say that we are really two Americas and not one, that we are no longer the United States of America. But we know on this day, on this Shabbat, on this celebration of our veterans, that that is not true. Our diversity is and has always been our strength. Principled disagreement has always moved us forward. Otherwise, we never would have bothered to adopt e pluribus unum as our nation's motto. America is an ongoing exercise in making a plurality into a singularity, of knitting one stitch at a time, the many into one. Friends, there is a lot of volatile holiness in our country this week. And I want to reassure you that your rage is sacred, your optimism is sacred, your resentment and your hope and your sharply focused vision of what this country must be to be its best, that picture is holy. Don't let it go. Remember that the most important and holy time of prayer that we share is when we stand up together and we say a sentence that starts with the word Shema, listen, and it ends with Echad, because oneness is at the core of God's identity, just as it is at the core of our identity as Israel as well. I want to wish everyone in here a week of shalom, a weekend of peace and unity and oneness. May God bless all of us, and may we move forward together. Amen.